If you are an ex-professional athlete, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to explain to you what Relevance Deficiency Syndrome is, also known as RDS, and how it is even more pronounced in ex-professional athletes. So if you have ever felt, or even more so wondered, why at times the remembrance of your athletic career or something that someone says that has to do with your old athletic career and your ex-professional career at times can stimulate like this deep feeling of sadness. It can trigger the feeling of disconnection, trigger the feeling of irrelevance, maybe confusion. And then on top of that, you've got the loss of identity and the loss of purpose, since you tied so much value, purpose, and identity to your previous athletic career. It is a very confusing and overwhelming world for many, stepping into the world of no longer being that professional athlete. I've been there myself, and it brings me so much blessing more than excitement. It feels like a blessing that I have learned so much, and I now can share and help you as an ex-professional athlete not only become aware of the things that you are going to struggle with or are struggling with now, but more so how to overcome them as well. But it does start with the awareness. So let's just make it clear, what is Relevance Deficiency Syndrome? Relevance Deficiency Syndrome is basically the sense that you no longer feel relevant in the space, the athletic career that you once dominated in, okay? So you no longer feel relevant there because you are no longer an athlete. If you lost your athletic career due to an injury you couldn't come back from, or a surgery that happened and it was unforeseen and it happened at the flick of a switch or the flick of your fingers, the experiences that you go through with the identity crisis, the loss of purpose, and relevance deficiency syndrome will be even more heightened. You will get triggered more easily, etc. But even if you just retired and it was your decision to leave, you still will experience a severe sense of relevance deficiency syndrome because you felt so relevant and you really dominated in the sport. You were a pro athlete for a reason, not just someone who did the sport recreationally or for fun. With the identity crisis, in case you don't know what that means, many professional athletes define themselves primarily by their sport, okay? So when that identity of their sport is threatened or lost, whether that was due to injury, retirement, or some sort of external factor, many athletes can experience a severe identity crisis and purpose, which is the central feature of relevance deficiency syndrome. Now, when we talk about the loss of purpose or the loss of meaning in life, what that is defined by in this context is losing the structure, losing the challenges, and the rewards of being in professional sports, okay? And this leads athletes to feel like they've lost their sense of meaning or contribution to the sport or contribution to the world in some way, okay? So this sense of lack of relevance in their previous environment can result in a very overwhelming sense of purposelessness. So the identity crisis and the loss of purpose tie into this relevance deficiency syndrome, also known as RDS, and make RDS even more heightened and even more severe in comparison to some other people who experience it. Now onto the psychological and emotional side of RDS, relevance deficiency syndrome, in retired athletes. As I mentioned, at times, maybe you feel disconnected, but what that disconnection is actually the disconnection from your sport, okay? Often feel really alienated when they lose their sport and their sporting career, especially if they're no longer able to participate at this high level, okay? Remember, it's all, the worse RDS is, the worse the loss of identity, the worse the loss of purpose. It tends to be worse based on how well you were as an athlete, how much you dominated, or how much of a high level you played in, okay? And, you know, I was there myself, and it sucks. You have this very high caliber of athlete that you once were, and chances are that now you feel alienated from your sport, okay? Because not only can you not do your sport, but you also definitely can't do it at such a high level, okay? Hence why you may struggle to find relevance in other aspects of life. Relevance in other aspects of life. You could step into any other career, any other environment even, and just not feel relevant there, okay? I remember for me, when I came back home from Germany, it was during COVID, but anyway, I thought I was gonna end up going back once COVID was done, but then I had all these surgeries done, and obviously the surgeries didn't work. If you don't know me, I'm the girl who had many unsuccessful left ankle surgeries. And so what happened was I didn't even feel relevant in my city or in my home country. That is a huge level of deficiency, to not feel like you're relevant in your own city or your own country. Let alone like at Woolies in a grocery store. I was used to being in a different, it was actually Aldi that I used to shop at in Germany. And you know, it was all in euros and the food tasted very different. It even goes down to those micro level aspects of feeling relevant in life as well. Another one is the feeling of inadequacy, okay? Because you feel so unrelevant, and it really is a deficiency of feeling relevant, it leads to really strong feelings of being inadequate. When you lost your sport and the accompanying identity that, you know, was associated with your sport, it was stripped away, okay? So you tend to really question your worth. Alongside that, when you are an athlete, your worth is kind of based on how good you are. And if you didn't do something or you didn't win the competition, then you don't deserve the medal. Like, they're actual based on how people, like coaches, responded to you. Your worth is based on physical numbers. Maybe it was based on the physical aspect of money. Maybe it was based on the physical aspect of trophies and medals. Like, your worth was literally based off calculated things, okay? So now, not only can you not base your worth off calculated things, but you also don't even have a really strong sense of I am worthy, because you no longer have the chance to do very important and very relevant aspects of your sporting career. And the deficiency of not feeling adequate, it does lead to, you know, really low levels of self-esteem as well. Your self-esteem was also tied to your career, okay? Another one, which I definitely, you know, struggled with a lot and went through and have now came out on the other side, which is crazy, but this isn't for me, this is for you, is apathy and depression. So since you struggle with relevance in lots of other areas, your sense of apathy and depression is even heightened and even stronger. So losing your career, which has been the central focus of your life for not just years, but most likely decades and decades, a small trigger of someone, you know, asking you what happened, or seeing an old memory of a photo, anything that could trigger the remembrance of your career can also trigger emotional numbness or apathy. Some athletes really experience like a deep level of depression due to the loss of either the excitement that came from performing their sports or the validation of doing their sport. You constantly felt validated to be in your environment because you were that athlete. You know, you were coached by a certain coach. Your competitors were certain competitors. Maybe you felt validated to be in your country because you were an athlete, and you know, therefore you're validated to live in that country. It brings alongside a lot of validation. So when that excitement or validation is stripped, it very easily can trigger really deep levels of depression or apathy. Another one is heightened anxiety. I struggled with this for many years after losing my athletic profession. Nonetheless, I was already a bit of an anxious athlete. So if you at times were anxious during your athletic career, it wouldn't surprise me if your anxiety that you're dealing with as an ex-professional athlete now is really, really, really heightened. The thing to understand here is that most of the anxiety isn't about the fact that you can't do your career. Most of the anxiety is actually about you have no clue what to do in the future, okay? Like, you know deep down that finding a new purpose and a new meaning would just be like, oh, finally. And it would relieve a lot of those feelings of anxiety. But the thing is, you don't know what to do in your future, most likely. And that leads to a very high sense of anxiety or anxiousness. You may also have the anxiousness, I know for men who were like the financial providers for their family from their sport, they experience a lot of like financial anxiety because, you know, that was their form of income. And then all of a sudden, not only can they not financially support themselves, but they also feel held responsible to financially support their family and their loved ones. And then you've got the male aspect of being a masculine character, and males are meant to provide, right? And males should provide financial security and all those kinds of, you know, things to deal with as a male. You also may experience a lot of anxiety around the simple aspect of, how do I redefine success then? Like, and I struggled with that for a very long time. For a very long time, no matter how successful I was at, you know, I had to do year 11 and 12 in 7 months after not touching a textbook for like 7 years. I didn't finish school. I gave up my, you know, education for my athletic career. And, you know, even working through all the barriers there and getting a really good, it's called an ATAR in Australia, at least where I did it, which is a score to get into university. Even after like achieving a lot, it felt like nothing. It was like, this is not success. This is like nothing, right? Even like getting into the university and the great degree, it didn't feel like a success. So even in new achievements that you're making in other areas of your life, you still may struggle to redefine this success. And so it leaves you constantly feeling really anxious. And the thing to grasp here is that any form of anxiousness or anxiety that you experience, it just heightens the level of relevance deficiency syndrome. So it's like, you know, the domino effect. The anxiety is like the domino effect to shoot the relevance deficiency syndrome through the roof for you. Another one is burnout. And I definitely have my story with this one, but just so you understand it, your years, most likely decades of very high pressure environments, not just from coaches, but also the pressure that you constantly put on yourself. Nonetheless, maybe you had pressure from like family members or people who you were close with. The constant pressure of that, the physical demanding work, like your bodies are being overused all the time, even though you might not think that way as an athlete, they actually are. And then you've also got the constant mental strain of, you know, just feeling burnt out. Not all athletes go through like mentally feeling burnt out because they will deny it, you know? But if you were a pro athlete, at some point you were mentally burnt out. Not necessarily physically burnt out, probably as well, but definitely I can assure you mentally burnt out at some point. But because you have such a strong mentality and a strong sense of discipline, we deny the mental burnout, okay? And I like the analogy of like walking on thin ice, okay? And you know, like those places where it's really thin ice, but if you stood on the thin ice, it's gonna break and you're gonna fall into the freezing water. That is what you have been doing for not just years, but decades of your athletic career, okay? You've been walking on the thin ice of mental burnout just due to all of the aspects of being a professional athlete and all it took you to even be a professional athlete in the first place, right? You're not just born a professional athlete. So all of this mental strain, it easily can trigger a just huge kind of mental collapse and severe mental burnout, because losing your career could have been the last thing that caused the ice to break, okay? Not necessarily, but for many people, many ex-professional athletes, losing their career was the last thing, and the ice just broke and now they're in the freezing cold water. For me, I experienced severe depression, apathy, all the things, anxiousness, but I wasn't burnt out to the point of not being able to do anything because of the instilled discipline I still had from my career, okay? And I also had this aspect of me was like, oh, if I find a new purpose, or I'm productive, or I try and redefine my success, then I'll feel better, right? So I spent about 4 years in that kind of aspect and way of living and breathing and trying to get through day to day. And then eventually I ran into 6 months of severe depression, like depression where it was like, I actually don't want to get out of bed, which for me was like, especially athletes, you have such a strong sense of discipline, and you will be in denial of a lot of these negative emotions as well, because that is how you kept going in your career at those very low moments of your career, which any pro athlete would have experienced, right? I'm sure you're familiar with that. So what happened with me was, at some point I had just been under so much mental strain, not just from my career, but the loss of my career and some other things as well that had happened. Along with constant surgeries. I have now had like 8 or 9 surgeries on my left foot, okay? That is years of surgeries though, right? It was about 4.5 years worth of surgeries, and constantly it just getting worse and worse. There was a point where I may as well have been living in a wheelchair. I worried about the fact of, not to get too off track, but I literally worried about the fact of, I want a family one day. What if I fall pregnant and then that extra weight I can't carry because I can barely carry my own weight on 2 feet. Like, it really stressed me out. And it caused a collapse for 6 months. It really did. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I had to hold myself. I had to hug myself. I had to give myself that time to feel burnt out. Okay? And I knew, because I had been holding it all in and walking on that thin ice for just way too long, I knew that I had to let myself feel like that. I had to let myself experience all the emotions to their full extent, okay? Because without that, they're just gonna sit there and mellow, right? And it sucked, I was like, oh no, let's get up and be productive. Let's go do something. And I knew that mentality is actually stopping me and blocking me from stepping forwards and healing. Because you have to feel all those negative emotions and grieving and all those kinds of things. You have to feel those. You have to accept those feelings fully in order to then move into healing. And I knew that I wouldn't stay like this for years of my life, but I did know that I had to allow myself to feel like that. And feeling like that, it started off of, okay, let's get up at 10 a.m., 12 p.m. There were days where I got up at like 2 or 3 p.m., which was unheard of for me. I was like 4:30, 5 a.m. person. I was a person who always did stuff, who consistently worked on making money or her education, but deep down was suffering so much. And the 6-month period that I had was actually the best thing. Yeah, for many, though, they experience that straight away. And losing their career is the tipping point for them. And that leads just to severe burnout. I didn't really talk about it then, but it's very important to remind you that you also have the mental strain of everything that you would have experienced in your professional career, that you did kind of deny, that you did fully not feel, fully not accept, because you had to keep going on with your career. So you've got like 2 elements of burnout, 1 from being an athlete and 2 from losing being an athlete. Which contribute to it. I'm actually surprised that I didn't break into the ice initially. In one way, upon reflection, I wish I did though. I wish I slipped off, I wish I cracked the ice instantly, because then I would have initiated my healing journey a lot quicker. Moving on to how relevance deficiency syndrome is triggered by the loss of your athletic career. So aspects of losing your athletic career that can actually trigger the RDS, okay? One, which I've mentioned before, is the loss of identity. I have a whole video about the loss of identity if you want to watch it, but it's a huge topic, so I don't really want to dive deep into that one as well. Second one is public and social recognition, okay? And this can go in kind of two ways. One is, because you were an athlete, you were constantly validated for being in that environment. So some athletes, ex-professional athletes, will feel the need to be validated for what they used to do, okay? They will want people to talk about it. They will want people to recognize them as like this, you know, Australia's best, whatever, rugby player, whatever it was. They will want to be recognized, okay? And they want the social recognition, they want the public recognition, they want people talking about it, they want people maybe feeling sorry for them and, you know, all those kinds of things due to their career. They want the recognition that they had a really successful career. They want that. On the flip side though, some people want the opposite. They don't want anyone to talk about it. They don't want anyone to even know. I know for myself, I didn't want anyone to know. I will admit I had a great resume, okay? So, and I went through all these different jobs that I did just for extra financial stability. And, you know, I would tell the person in the interview, like, you know, if you do hire me, can you just maybe not mention the whole, like, you know, ballet thing? And I didn't want people to know. And I will admit, going to university was like the best feeling in the world. I was like, yes, no one knows who I am. No one is going to be, you know, as well as an athlete, sometimes you will experience as being an ex-professional athlete, some of your friends don't really want to be your friends anymore. Some of your acquaintances don't really want to be acquainted with you anymore because they were only friends with you or acquainted with you because you were, you know, so-called out of the norm. You were so-called glorious. You were so-called, you know, really talented. And for me, I experienced the loss of a lot of like ballet friends and people who wanted to be my friends for other reasons. People who weren't even ballet friends of mine. People who were just like friends or acquaintances with me. And then they didn't want anything to do with me anymore because I no longer did that career. And so for me, that was all fake. For me, they didn't truly, you know, didn't truly want to be my friend or acquainted with me for who I was, for my personality, for my morals, for my values, okay? For that. And it hurt. And so going into university, no one knowing who I was a great feeling. It was like, great, I'm gonna be seen and I'm gonna be heard for who I am, not for what I do. So on the flip side, you may really not want the social recognition. You may really not want the public recognition. And I remember this is going to be a long video, but basically I had this one job where I was at a gym and I was doing receptionist work and I had my foot up on the desk. The people who came to sign up to the gym or have inquiries about the gym couldn't see my foot up on the desk because it was one of those receptionist desks that's a little bit higher. But the other receptionist team and workers there could see that my foot was on the desk, which was fine because I had had more surgeries. And one of the team members, really friendly guy, asked me like, oh, okay, what happened to your foot? You know, obviously you had surgery. I was like, oh yeah, just was born with a bad foot. It needed surgery for a long time, kind of bluffed it off. And he was like, yeah, well, I've seen you like always walking around with like ankle sprain straps and like sometimes you hobble around a bit. And he's like, is everything okay? He was just, you know, he was genuinely empathetic, you know. And I said, oh, well, you know, hopefully everything's okay now that, you know, I've had surgery and hopefully, you know, it recovers well. I appreciated it. And he said, you know, someone told me you used to be a professional ballerina. And I was just like, oh. And I didn't want that recognition and I bluffed it off. And I was like, oh, yeah, sort of, obviously not really because my foot's up on a, you know, and just made a joke out of it. But the thing to recognize here is that you will have either the need to be recognized or you will have the need to really not be recognized. And that is just part of the relevance deficiency syndrome and the emotions that any sort of recognition or unrecognition can trigger. It's just based off personality, really. Another one I want to talk about is social isolation, okay? So professional athletes are often surrounded by really close-knit team members. For me, my ballet friends were like my own little family. I lived on the other side of the world and they were all in the same mindset. They were the best ballerinas I've ever danced alongside with, quite truly. I loved being there. And, you know, for many, it's your sense of community as well. So when you leave the sport, you may feel that you've lost your community. I felt like I had lost my own little family as well. And it results in social isolation, okay? Without the camaraderie and, you know, the shared goals and the really common mindset, you may feel cut off from your entire support team. I definitely did. And social media only works so much, you know. I was on the other side of the planet, and, you know, it just like the communication, like no one, I don't know. It was like, again, the aspect of like, oh, was that really my little family? Did they really care? Did they really want to be my friends? Or were they just like, you know, wanting to be associated with me? Who knows? Who knows? I still don't know to this very day. But social isolation can trigger your sense of RDS even more, okay? When you feel like you can't meet anyone like-minded, you don't meet or know anyone who is in the same shoes as you, okay? Like when I lost my career, no one else had lost their career. When I had lost my career, no one else had gone through 8 surgeries. When I lost my career, like, you know, no one else was going through the same thing that I was going through. And that was something like my heart really ached for, but of course I couldn't find. But with that being said, you know, if I had found a little video like this, even on YouTube, that would have made me feel like, oh, I'm not alone. Someone gets it. Someone's been here, you know, with me. And I don't want to say too much, but it is one of my admirations in the future to create a community of ex-professional athletes who are going through that identity crisis and loss of purpose, etc., and RDS, so that they don't feel alone, okay? They are with like-minded people. And that was something that I really needed, okay? So I really look forward to creating that in the future. And if you are watching this video in the future, there might be a link where you can join a free community as well. So check that one out. No promises, but yes. Moving on to a little bit of a harsher topic is the impact of RDS on retired or injured athletes, okay? One thing that is so important to recognize is the psychological decline that you will experience. Losing a career had led to an erosion of self-worth for many because you held your sense of worthiness to your athletic career and aspects of your career. I went over that in another video though. Many athletes base their value off their performance and their role in the sporting world. Again, I have another video about that. We don't really need to get into that much, but just recognizing like psychologically, you might notice yourself declining and it makes sense. Secondly is a huge difficulty transitioning, okay? Athletes often struggle with career transitions. You also may feel a very strong need to transition into another career because you think finding that new career, you'll find your new identity, you'll feel like you're purposeful, you'll feel like you're meaningful. Trust me, you won't unless you do the inner healing first. If you have started this new career, you may feel like though, I'm starting from scratch in another field and you're back at square one, and it might bring up the feeling of failing, etc. It can make you feel irrelevant or out of place in any professional setting as well, because your professional setting was something that you can't do and you never will be able to do in the same manner ever again. Thirdly is the emotional toll, okay? Athletes can experience a really deep emotional pain when they are no longer able to perform at the level that they once did. They feel the weight of like this missed opportunity, the weight of, oh, what if I never find my purpose? What if I never find my true sense of identity? What if I never find like-minded people? What if I never find that I'm able to, you know, fly in airplanes and travel around the world? What if I'm never on the stage again? What if I'm never in the swimming arena ever again because I'm too afraid to be there? All of these what ifs, you know, tie into this huge sense of an emotional toll on you, and they weigh you down like a ton of bricks. To conclude off here, relevance deficiency syndrome is extremely common, okay? It's very pronounced. When I had first heard of the word relevance deficiency syndrome, I was like, oh my goodness, that sounds really extreme. And like, oh, there must be something really wrong with me. But no, it's just the, you know, medical kind of diagnosis for what you are experiencing. And there's so many factors that tie into it, okay? Like, there's even other factors that I haven't put in this video just because it's so long, it's so extensive, and it's so deep. But in doing so and in talking about these things, it creates the awareness and understanding of why you're feeling the way you're feeling, why you struggle in the areas that you're struggling in. And to finish off here, and something that is very important, is you may also experience the difficulty in like personal relationships, intimate relationships, friendships, any sort of relationships, even the relationships of like mum and dad and grandpa and grandma, or siblings and cousins, like people who didn't technically have much to do with your career other than they supported you in your career. Athletes, when they lose their career, they also lose their sense of social status, okay? Big time, because your social status was tied to your career as well, which is a whole nother topic. But essentially, your social status decline affects your personal relationships, okay? And you may struggle with feelings of kind of alienation, or like the need to reinvest towards certain family members or friends who just don't understand the struggle that you're going through. No one, if we're going to finish off the video on one topic, it's the fact that no one's going to understand the struggle that you're going through unless they were also a pro athlete and lost their career, okay? It's such a, for lack of a better word, it's such a niched loss. Even though it's a very sad thing, it's a very niched loss, okay? And I truly do believe that only really athletes can, ex-professional athletes, other ex-professional athletes can resonate with you. But in saying so, that is something that can really heal the difficulty that you have with personal relationships, because all of a sudden you have a community of people who resonate. They actually get it. They really get it. And so again, at the point of filming this video, there is no link, but there may be a link at this point in time because you're watching this video in the future of a free community that you can join, which is full of ex-professional athletes who are going through the same thing. So that's it for today's video, guys. If you did like this video, drop a like, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, definitely do so, because there's always more content coming out like this. And yeah, feel welcome to share it with anyone who you may know who is an ex-professional athlete going through, you know, relevance deficiency syndrome and identity crisis, loss of purpose, all the things, surgeries maybe, all those things as well. You're welcome to share it with them because I know it would help them a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.